Welcome. In this video I'm going to show you how you can obtain different means using Microsoft Excel. I actually have a separate video where I simply use my own created add-in, which has a function that can calculate all these different means just as one function. But in this video I'll show you how you can calculate all of them without using any add-ins. So I have my data stored in column A, and the first mean is the most popular one, which is usually referred to as average. It's one of the three Pythagoras means, the arithmetic mean. So it's simply the sum of all the scores and then divide by the number of items, and in Excel you can just use the average function for that. The geometric mean is slightly different. It's often used with ratios, but Excel has a function for geomean and it simply calculates it for you. The harmonic mean, often used with interests. Here's the complicated formula, but again, Excel has you covered, and there is simply a function built in called harmean, which gives you the harmonic mean. So far so good, but then there's the Olympic mean. The Olympic mean is actually all the scores, so we sum up everything, we subtract the minimum and subtract the maximum, and because we subtracted two values, we divide by the number of scores minus 2. So we can just use Excel's formula. We sum everything up, we remove the maximum and remove the minimum, and then divide all of that by the number of items minus 2. Be careful with all the brackets though, because they should be in the right place. The mid-range is also fairly straightforward. It's the minimum plus the maximum divided by 2, so we can simply use Excel's max and min function for that and then divide by 2. The trimmed mean means actually that I remove some of the data. Now luckily Excel actually has a function for this called trim mean, so it will remove a trimmed proportion. So in this case it's removing 20% from the so 10% I think from both sides, so from the low end and from the upper end, and simply calculates the average of what remains. Winsorized does something different, and unfortunately Excel doesn't have a function for this yet, at least. What that does is it replaces those values. So in order to do this, we start again with a trim proportion of 20%. We determine our sample size by using a count function. So in this case there are 1969. Then I actually determine how many values I want to replace on each side. So that means I'll simply going to say, well, I'm going to take my trim proportion, multiply that by the sample size, divided by 2 because it's for each side, and it must be an integer number, so I round it down to 0. Alright. Then I'm going to list all values from 1 to n. So what I've done is in column B, it's simply a matter of every time it checks if this one is not empty. If it is empty, then just empty. Otherwise, if this one plus 1 is bigger than the sample size, then empty. And in all other cases, just add 1. If you don't want to use a formula for this, you can just type in 1, 2, 3 and drag it all the way down. So that's what's being done here. Then we find the corresponding value for each of these using the small function. So again, I check if it's not empty, and otherwise I'm going to use the smallest from all the values in A, and then this is the index number. So that means that this column now actually has the same data as here, but it's actually sorted. So you could have also just, if you want to skip these steps, you can just select column A and then go for sort and then sort. Then the next thing is we find the lowest value to replace. So we have to look up, this is the value we're going to replace. We add 1 so that we're actually not replacing. We look it up in our index, so that's here's the index number, here's the value, and we want an exact match. Notice I'm using semicolons as separators. In your version of Excel that might have to be a comma. So the value 25 is at number 196. We do the same, but then from the lower end, so we take the sample size minus that 196, and then again we look it up and we return the second value. So all values that are below 25 will be replaced with 25, and all values that are above 73 will be replaced with 73. And that's actually what's going on in column D. So here what I've done is, if this value is less than my lower bound, then replace it with that value. If it's greater than my upper bound, then replace it with this value, and that way I'm sure I actually have replaced all the values. Finally, then we can determine the Winsorized mean, which is then simply the average of column D. Alright, the decile mean is actually the average of the 9 deciles, or the 10 percentiles. So, well, deciles. And that's actually a percentile at 10%. So luckily Excel has a percentile function. There's actually an inclusive and an exclusive version. I have a whole separate video on quantiles, for which the percentiles are actually a separate a specific type, a special type. In this case, I'm just going to use the Excel function to calculate all of these 9, and then it's a matter of the average of those. Alright, and those are a bunch of different methods or a bunch of different means to calculate with Excel. I hope this video was helpful, and thank you for watching.